Hi guys, last week we were identifying and creating fractions. This week we're sticking with fractions, and today we're going to be looking at finding a fraction of a value or an amount. To begin with, let's get thinking. Here we've got Larry, and you can see that Larry has given some of his sweets to Batman, and I want you to decide whether you think the following statement is true or false. Larry has given half of his sweets to Batman. So once again, I'd like you to pause the video for a couple of minutes, discuss with your partner, and then share your thoughts with the class. If you remember last week when we were making fractions, those fractions had to be equal parts. So when we're making halves, there has to be two equal parts. Now that's going to apply when we're looking at amounts like we are here too. So to begin with, Larry had 10 sweets. He's only given 4 sweets to Batman and he's kept 6 for himself. Has he shared those sweets equally? No, he's not. So here it would be false. He's not given half of his sweets to Batman. What could he do so that he had given half of his sweets away? Well, if he gave Batman a further 1 sweet, they would both have 5 sweets each. They've both got an equal share, so we can say that Larry has half and Batman has half. Next, I'd like you to consider the following two problems. Lucy has 14 sweets to begin with. There you can see them there. And she's saying, I am going to eat half of my sweets. And we want to know, how many sweets does she eat? And next we've got Emmit. And Emmit has 6 sweets left. Now he's saying, I have already eaten half of my sweets. So those 6 sweets are just what he's got remaining. And we want to know, how many sweets did Emmit have to begin with? So pause the video for a few minutes, use whatever resources you've got available to you, and see if you can solve each of those problems with a partner. Let's look at Lucy to begin with. She had 14 sweets to begin with, and she's going to eat half of those sweets. We're interested in halves, so I'm going to put out a bar that's split into 2 equal parts. So you can see I've got halves there. You might want to use bits of paper like we did last week, or you might want to use those fraction cards. Now, if she eats half of those, then she's going to keep half of them as well. So we're going to label each of those parts. So we've got the sweets that she eats and the sweets that she's left with. Now all we need to do is start to share out those sweets. Have those sweets been shared out equally? Yes, I've got the exact same amount in each part. So I've split those sweets in half. And when we count up the sweets in each part, we can see that she eats 7 of those sweets and she's left with 7 of those sweets as well. Let's have a look at Emmit. Now for Emmit it says he's got 6 sweets left and he's already eaten half of his sweets. That means he started out with more sweets. And we want to know, how many sweets did Emmit have to begin with? So let's take the 6 sweets that he's got left and let's put that in that part there. I know that he ate half, so we're going to add another half on. So you can see there we've got 2 parts and he ate exactly the same amount of sweets that he's got left because we've got half the sweets left and half the sweets have been eaten. So we can now see that the total amount of sweets that he started with is all of those sweets added together. And when we add those together, we get 12 sweets. So Emmit had 12 sweets to start with. Next, I'd like you to have a look at the following 2 problems. Aquaman has 12 sweets to begin with, and he's saying, I'm going to eat a quarter of my sweets. So we want to know, how many sweets does he eat? And next, Wonder Woman has 15 sweets to begin with, and she's saying, I'm going to eat a third of my sweets. And we want to know, how many sweets does she eat? So once again, I'd like you to pause the video for a few minutes. With a partner, use whatever resources you've got available in order to solve each of these problems. Let's have a look at Aquaman first. It says Aquaman has 12 sweets to begin with and he's going to eat 1/4 of his sweets. We're interested in quarters, so we're going to split that whole amount into 4 equal parts. So let's draw a bar split into 4 parts, and once we've done that, we can see that he eats 1/4 of those, so let's label that, which means he's going to be left with 3/4 of the sweets. Now that we've done that, we can share out those sweets equally between each of the quarters. Those sweets have now been shared fairly between each of the quarters. We can see that there are 3 sweets in each quarter, and he only eats 1/4 of the sweets, which means that he eats 3 of those sweets. Let's have a look at Wonder Woman, and it said she had 15 sweets to begin with, and she eats 1/3 of her sweets. Now this time we're interested in thirds, so we're going to draw a bar and split that into 3 equal parts. She eats 1 of those thirds, so let's label one of those parts what she eats, which means she's left with the other 2 parts. Once again, we can share out those sweets equally. We can now see that she eats just 5 of those sweets. So 1/3 of the 15 sweets is 5 sweets. It's time to get investigating with a partner, so here are 3 different problems that I want you to have a go at. Emmit has 20 chocolate buttons. He eats 1/5 of them. How many chocolate buttons does he eat? Lucy has £24. She spends 1/3 of her money on lunch. How much was her lunch? And finally, Larry has 16 bags of coffee. He sells 3/4 of the bags. How many bags does Larry sell? Now remember, I'm not just looking for an answer for each of these. I want you to be able to explain how you're working it out. You might use bar models to help you analyse these problems. I want you to use resources in order to solve them, and can you draw pictures to explain and prove how you worked it out? So you might want to draw the buttons, the money, and the coffee bags themselves. I'm going to show you 3 different bars that are going to help you with this. So if you want to make it a bit trickier, pause the video now. Otherwise, here are 3 bars that should help you with each of those problems. For Emmit, we're dealing with fifths, so here's a bar that I've split into 5 equal parts. Lucy, we're dealing with thirds, so here's a bar that I've split into 3 equal parts. And for Larry, we're dealing with quarters, so here's a bar that I've split into 4 equal parts. Pause the video for 8 to 10 minutes and have a go at solving each of those. Let's look at Emmit to begin with. He had 20 chocolate buttons and he ate 1/5 of them, and we want to know how many chocolate buttons did he eat. So let's start by drawing our bar. That bar is going to represent the whole amount, which in this case is all the chocolate buttons that he starts with. He eats 1/5 of them, so we're dealing with fifths, so let's split this bar into 5 equal parts. We know that he eats 1 of those shares, which means he's left with the rest of those shares. We know that he had 20 chocolate buttons to begin with, so let's put that there. We're interested here in how many he eats, so that's where our question mark's going to go. And now that we've done that, we can share out those chocolate buttons. I can give 1 to each part, 2 to each part, 3 to each part, and a 4th chocolate button to each part. So we can see there that he eats 4 of those chocolate buttons. And we can also put in the amount that he's left with. I can see he's got 4 lots of 4, which is 16 chocolate buttons. Let's have a look at Lucy. Lucy had £24 to begin with. She spends 1/3 of it on her lunch, and we want to know how much was her lunch. So once again, let's start with the bar to represent the whole amount. That whole amount is the amount of money that she starts with. She spends 1/3 of her money, so we're going to split this bar into 3 equal parts. And we can label those parts. We know that 1 of those parts is what her lunch cost, and the other 2 parts is the money that she's going to be left with. We know that she has £24 to begin with, so let's put that in as our whole amount, and we're interested in how much money she spent on her lunch, so let's put the question mark there. Once again, we can share out this money. I could do this £1 at a time, but I can also see I've got enough to put £2 in each at a time. So let's do that to begin with. So let's put £2 in each. Let's share another £2. I've still got enough to share out more. Let's share another £2 out. And finally, we've got enough to put another £2 in each of those parts. I have split that money into 3 equal parts. I've split it into thirds. I'm interested in 1 of those thirds because that's the money she spent on her lunch. And I can see that altogether she spent £8 on her lunch. And I can also see that I can work out how much she had left. That's just 2 lots of the 8, or the 24 take away the 8, which gives us £16. Finally, let's look at Larry. He had 16 coffee bags to begin with. This time he sells 3/4 of them. How many bags does Larry sell? Again, we're going to draw the bar to represent the whole amount. That's the amount of coffee bags that he starts with. He sells 3/4 of them, so this time we're going to split that bar into 4 because we're interested in quarters again. But he doesn't just sell one of those quarters, he sells 3 of them. So let's label 3 of those parts what he sells, which means one of the parts is what he's left with. Then we can put in the values we know. We know that he's got 16 coffee bags to begin with, so that's the whole amount that he starts with, and we're interested in how many coffee bags he sells. So let's put a question mark there. Once again, we can share out those coffee bags. I can put 2 in each part again, and I've got enough for another 2. I've shared out all the coffee bags and I've put 4 in each quarter. I'm not interested in just one of those quarters because I know that he sells 3/4 of the coffee. So I'm going to add up all the coffee bags in the 3/4 that he sells. So I've got 4 plus 4 plus 4, or 3 lots of 4, which gives me 12. And I can see there that he's left with 4 bags of coffee. It's time to discuss our success criteria. How did we achieve success? What are the steps that we went through in order to work out a fraction of an amount, just like we did for each of those questions? So pause the video for a few moments and discuss your thoughts with a partner. What did we do to solve each of those problems? The first thing we needed to do was draw a bar, and that bar represented the whole amount. So once we'd done that, we could describe that whole amount, and in the case of Larry, that was all the coffee bags that he started with. The next thing we can do is decide how many parts are we going to split our bar into, and the fraction name is going to help us. In the case of Larry's problem, that was quarters that we were dealing with, so we're going to split this bar into 4 parts. Now that we've done that, we can name each of those parts. For Larry, we knew that he sold 3/4 of the coffee, so we're going to label 3 of those quarters what he sells and 1 of those quarters what he's left with. Once we've done that, we can then write the amounts that we know. Now in this case, we knew the whole amount. That was the 16 bags of coffee, so we're going to put that in at the top. And what we were interested in was how much coffee he sells. So we're going to put our question mark there. Now that we've done that, we can share out that whole amount equally between each of the parts. And the last thing we need to do is count up the parts that we're interested in. And in this case, that was the coffee bags that were in 3 of those parts. So we could work out that he sold 12 of those coffee bags. It's time to try that out. Here are 3 different problems that I'd like you to have a go at. Each of the problems has got 3 different numbers. I want you to choose the number that's right for you. Not too easy and not too difficult. So for the first question, I'm going to use the yellow number. Rex has a bag with 12 sweets altogether. 1/6 of the sweets are cherry flavoured. How many cherry flavoured sweets are in the bag? For the second question, I'm going to use the green number. 2/3 of the children in a football club are boys. How many boys are in the club if there are 36 children altogether? And for the third question, I'm going to use the red number. A teacher has a box of 96 pens. She shares out 5/8 of the pens between the class. How many pens has she shared out? Remember, I don't want you just to come up with an answer to each of these. I want you to draw bars, pictures, and use the resources available to you in order to analyse and solve each of those problems. You might even want to use the fractions that you made last week when we used the bits of paper in order to identify and create fractions. Pause the video for 10 minutes or so and have a go at those. It's time to reflect on what we've learned today. So pause the video for a few minutes and share your thoughts about the following questions. What have you learned today? What did you find easy or difficult? Did you get stuck? What helped you when something got tricky? What did you need more help with? What is really making you think? And what are your next steps? The last thing I'd like you to do today is, can you apply what we've learned? So as a class, I'd like you to discuss, analyse and solve the following problem. President Business is planting flowers in the garden. 1/4 of the flowers are red. He plants 6 red flowers. How many flowers does he plant altogether? And once you've had a go at that, why don't you try solving the same problem, only this time 1/4 of the flowers are still red, but he plants 15 red flowers. Thanks for taking part today. I hope you found that useful. If you want to get in touch for any reason, there are my contact details. It's the holiday next week, so we're going to be back in 2 weeks' time when we're going to be comparing amounts. I hope you can join me then.